Yeah, somebody had to say it. So we already did this in the 80s, in the 90s, and in the Fast and Furious 2000s. We had the tuner culture. And today we're going to draw the parallel between the old school tuners and the overlanders of today. There's a peculiar similarity between people who modded old Hondas and Nissans and Acuras and Mazdas and the stuff going on today in the 4x4 world. Anybody who's conscientious has noticed that the overlanders do the same stuff that everybody did to their Honda Civics back in the day. They take the suspension, instead of lowering it 3 inches, they raise it 3 inches. They mess around with the control arms. They change out the lights to LED light bar, all the Honda stuff, the exhaust, the colors, all the stuff. It's too much to list. All that stuff is happening in the overlanding world. It's the same thing. Now, before we begin, we've got to establish form versus function. Of course, it's your car, it's anybody's car. They can do whatever they want with their car, and that's all good. Obviously, you can do whatever you want for looks. Today, we're more focused on what is looks and what is function. In other words, how much of that crap is just for show and how much of it is actually going to make a real bona fide improvement. Of course, this is where things are going to get sensitive to some people, because just like back in the day with the tuner world, a lot of those mods were primarily for looks. And then came the mental gymnastics, convincing yourself that it was also function, that your track times were going to get better. They never got better. Fast forward to today, we have the same thing in the 4x4 / overlanding world, whatever you want to call it. You see a bunch of mods that are primarily for looks, and again come the same mental gymnastics that, oh yeah, it improves things. Rare was the tuner that had enough integrity to admit that they screwed their ride up, slamming it down with a mild lowering kit and all the other Chinese aftermarket garbage that they put on it. Rare was the tuner that said, you know what, I just completely botched and ruined my Honda Civic. It rides worse. The steering is heavy. It sounds stupid. Everything's wrong. It looks cool, but it's worse. The same silly dragon chasing happens today in overlanding 4x4 world, where on come the lift kits and all the other crap, and the same cognitive dissonance is at hand. Oh yeah, it's better. That 3-inch lift totally improved my ride. It's awesome. Yeah, it handles great over bumps. It just soaks up the bumps. It's so much better. Yeah, been there, done that. Same thing, different day. The fact remains that generally speaking, most of the typical mods in whatever culture we're talking about are mostly detrimental, period. Detrimental in the sense of solving some sort of problem. And when it comes to talking about functional modifications, and remember that's what we're talking about today, not look stuff, function stuff. When it comes to that, we must establish that there is a problem first before we then mod. In other words, find the problem and then mod to solve the problem. We've gotten many comments on this channel that this Lexus GX460 is not prepared to go off-roading because it doesn't look like an overglamper with all the crap hanging off the sides of it. There's no reason to have any of that junk glued on the outside. Everything's inside. It's all in here. I got the controllers. This winch hooks up here if we need it. All the ropes, all the recovery gear, battery jump box, shovel, air compressor, it all fits here. It does not need to be hanging out of the back of your glamper, your overglamper. Unless you want it to look like you're going on adventures. Now the inverse is true in this 4x4 tuner culture. Those that look like overglampers and look prepared tend to also not be prepared. Oh, a GX460 just went by. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics of what mod does what and this, that, and the other. We could go on forever. The point is that, as in the tuner days, it's always going to come down to skill and practice. The moment somebody starts talking about a shopping cart over here and how many items that you need to put in the shopping cart before you can do stuff with your vehicle, that's how you know that they're full of it. The problem from a pragmatist's perspective is you start to build with this shopping cart mentality a certain look, whether we're talking tuner or overlander or anything in between, and then the look gets mixed up with the necessity or the requirement. And so caution must be taken if you are pragmatic and modding for pragmatic reasons when determining what is looks and what is function. Now, this is not anti-mod or anti-tuner or anti-anything. As you can see here, this ugly, stupid thing is modified. But each mod solved a real problem that we had. From the stupid low-hanging Lexus bumper to the silly side steps to the lack of a transmission skid plate. And for us, insofar as pragmatism, that's all the mods that this thing needs to go on most black diamond trails and everything below it. But I get it. Some people will have a literal panic attack if their 4x4 is not lifted mildly 2 inches. They won't be able to leave their house. But do realize that that is not a practical modification. That's on the look side. And of course, the two worlds can overlap. But as of recent, there's been an imbalance. And the looks department is way ahead of the pragmatic, practical side of things. How do we know that? Because look at the vehicles. When they start getting sillier and sillier and more ridiculous looking, we know that it's not just the looks people who are like, I want to mod this truck and I want to make it look however I want. But now you're adding the people that also think that that's necessary. So now you got a bunch more that have bright orange traction boards hanging off the side of everything and 10-inch lifts to go on bunny hop trail. Now, the psychology behind why people tuned their Hondas back in the day is interesting because a lot of that transposes to now with Overlanders. Back then, the argument was, well, they can't have a real sports car like a Corvette or something, so they're going to make it look like a Corvette. They're going to make it low to the ground like a Corvette, and then it becomes a Corvette. But I'll make the argument that that wasn't truly the psychology behind that. Instead, it was becoming a boy racer. In other words, a means to use material purchases to replace skill. Today, we got the same thing with the rig culture. The shopping cart with all the crap inside the cart replaces the skill. Because just like back in the day, the tuners were never on the track. And just like today, ironically, overglampers aren't on any trail that a Honda Civic can't do. So ahead is the difference between an overlander and an off-roader. We got a real off-roader ahead of us. That's right. Okay. I love it. I love it. That's a Honda. Is that a Civic or an Accord? I think it's a Civic. So remember, off-roading is not what you drive. Off-roading is what you do. We are off-road and this Civic is doing it. Love it. Absolutely love it. Yes, these are generalizations. Of course, you had tuners that really went hardcore on the track back in the day. And yes, today you have overclampers that really go hardcore on black diamond and even red diamond trails. But generally speaking, neither of those scenarios are typical. What is typical is the moderate off-road trail, which I will say a million times, any stock 4x4 can do all moderate off-road trails in the United States of America without any problems or any modifications required. So if you're seeing overglampers go by with all this crap all over the outside of their vehicle and wondering what in the devil is going on, I remember years ago we saw our first Overlander and I thought they were filming a movie, or somebody, somebody's coming out to the desert to film something, like for some apocalyptic movie, I don't know. And we started seeing more and more. And then a few months and years later, we started seeing traffic jams of these same cookie cutter vehicles clogging up the easiest of trails, the ones that we take our old 95 Toyota Camry on just to be crazy. Yeah, conversation about form versus function is always going to trigger people. It's always going to hurt some feelings, and that's understandable. But this video, again, is not aimed at those people. It is aimed at the people that are new to off-roading or interested in overlanding and wonder, what do I need to get out there and have a good time on most common off-road trails? And the answer is soberingly simple. Get your 4x4 and drive it, and modify it when you actually have a problem, not when you imagine a problem. Now, the trigger word here is always going to be lift, and so I'm going to double down here. There's always going to be a silly argument that you need to lift your vehicle so it doesn't get damaged. Anybody who knows anything about off-roading, it doesn't matter what level we're talking about, hitting your vehicles on the rocks is normal. Doesn't matter if we're looking at big monster trucks or giant rock bouncers, they are high centering on rocks all the time. You see videos of people pushing giant trucks off of rocks trying to get them free from a high center. It goes with the territory. That is what off-roading is. So the argument that you're lifting your Overlander to avoid touching the rocks and brushing up against the bushes is the most petting zoo type of comment one can make.
Oh, rock slide.
And using a lift kit to try to avoid that experience is very ironic, because no matter what level you're off-roading at, you're going to get stuck, you're going to get pulled out, you're going to dig your way out, you might need a winch, stuff is going to happen. We don't fear that, oh no, I high-centered, I got stuck. That's what's supposed to happen.